monsters come to terrifying life.
Monsters represent everything that can get us and everything we're afraid of.
We're about to open the crypt and tell the secret tale behind our darkest fears and why they walk among us. From Dracula's shadowy origins.
Dracula comes at a time when the Victorian era is ending and women are becoming more sexually liberated.
To the American unrest that unleashed a zombie invasion.
It was flesh-eating, it was viral, and it was global.
They can be objects of horror.
Someone who you look at and know, all right, he's evil, guys should not sleep here in Castle Dracula.
Or reflections of our deepest desires.
Vampires represent the dark side, the sexy side, the unknown.
This is Love, Lust, and the Undead. Today, the undead dominate popular culture. Consider the tale of Bella and Edward, two teens in love. One, a high school girl. The other, a century-old vampire. Yes, the Twilight series is so huge, it's scary.
Twilight isn't just a phenomenon. It is the phenomenon of our decade.
I think the book has been translated into 39 languages.
There is no denying the huge cultural impact they have had, not just at the box office, where they've made over $1 billion, but also in introducing a new generation to vampire stories. I think every high school girl probably says, gee, I'd love to fall in love with a vampire too.
Vampires have come a long way. Vampires used to mean unbridled, carnal sexuality. The vampire was the Elvis of his day. Now he's the Justin Bieber.
Edward is a sanitized and super hot vampire for our glossy age. Sunlight doesn't kill him, it makes him sparkle. And he doesn't hunger for Bella's blood, he wants to marry her.
Edward is this vampire who isn't really a vampire. He's been conquered by love.
He's your new Prince Charming, essentially.
But it's a new twist in a very long tradition. Before Twilight, vampires are less Sweet Valley High and more the stuff of nightmares.
Vampires are people who have died and then come back, suck the blood of innocent victims, and because of that are able to live forever.
The origins of the vampire really go back to the Revenants in Eastern Europe, which were these animated corpses. They were, actual corpses.
The early vampires were more like, in some ways, what we would think of as zombies today.
Historically, the undead have been blamed for everything from crop failure to epidemics to unplanned pregnancies. So it kind of gives us an explanation and a release valve and a scapegoat.
The vampire as we know it first appears in English literature almost 200 years ago. The prototype for the modern bloodsucker isn't some creepy old count. It's actually a 19th century celebrity, the dashing poet Lord Byron, superstar of the Romantic Age.
Without Lord Byron, you don't have vampires. Without him, we would have not had Twilight. We wouldn't have had Dracula.
Lord Byron was the rock star of his day. It was the Romantic era, which meant that people were reading poetry the way people listen to music today.
He was a celebrity of the time in the same way that any movie star would be nowadays.
There are Byron souvenirs that are being made. Everybody wants to know him. Everybody wants him at their parties. Everybody wants to sleep with him.
He certainly could be an asshole and a bastard, but he also could pull you in like gravity and suck you right into his world.
Fans adore the Playboy poet as a genius and a sex symbol. But one man sees Byron as a monster. His doctor, John Polidori.
Polidori had signed up to be Byron's personal physician, thinking it was going to help him with his writing career.
However, Lord Byron makes fun of that aspiration.
But one dark and stormy night in 1816, the doctor takes his revenge, transforming Lord Byron into the first modern vampire.
A group of romantic poets are on Lake Geneva on this particular summer. It was constantly rainy,
stormy, lots of lightning.
You've got Lord Byron and his doctor, John Polidori, and Mary Shelley, and they challenge each other to write ghost stories.
Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein. John Polidori writes what is considered the first vampire short story.
Polidori's story, The Vampire, features an aristocratic villain named Lord Ruthven, who betrays his friend and sucks the life out of young women. Sound familiar?
Lord Ruthven is Byron, that sociopath that sucks you dry, that takes all of your life and you still don't care.
He describes to a T the way he looks and the way he dresses, and the entire world wants to read what looks like a biography of Lord Byron.
Byron's fame turns The Vampire into a hit, and with it, a new monster enters the popular imagination.
Polidori's Vampire represents that dynamite literary fusion of blood, sex, and death that becomes the recipe for all subsequent literary vampires.
Today, when we think vampires, we don't think about romantic poets. We think Dracula, one of the most infamous monsters the world has ever known. The king of vampires first emerges from his coffin in 1897, the work of a theatrical manager and writer named Bram Stoker.
It was the best thing he ever did, and he never wrote another bestseller after that. It spawned a whole other genre about vampires and created an icon that's still with us today.
Dracula is published during a time of great change in Victorian England. Tradition is giving way to progress.
There's an explosion of technology, there's a lot of new science that's coming out, and people don't know what to do with that. They're afraid.
Into this brave new world enters a specter from the past, an ancient vampire from Transylvania who infiltrates Victorian English society.
You have the Dracula monster of the East pitted against this rational scientific world of the West. And it's really society trying to figure out which one is going to win out.
Stoker's masterpiece pits superstition against reason. And you bet there's blood. But Dracula doesn't just conjure up the past. He's also a clever way to talk about the biggest taboo of the repressive Victorian age.
Victorians didn't want to talk about sex, and they kept sex as something that was incredibly taboo, something that had to be hidden.
But Dracula allows these stuffy Victorians a vicarious thrill.
The fascination of the vampire is that it's always equal parts desire and fear. And what we are the most afraid of is often what we want.
I guess it's that classic thing that girls go for the bad boy.
Everything that makes young women attracted to James Dean, Billy Idol, Elvis, punk rock, all that stuff is all mixed in with the attraction to the vampire.
The women in Dracula are drawn to him. They know that he's evil, but for some reason they want to go to him.
Say a Victorian audience is reading a vampire novel, they can see themselves as that woman who's being seduced.
Stoker's novel is popular with Victorian readers, but Dracula doesn't become a sensation for more than 2 decades when the vampire actually stands before them.
Theatrical productions of Dracula were something sensational. It was something that Victorian audiences had never experienced before, and it caused people in the audiences to faint. Mainly women, but some men too were so frightened by it that they would just get up and leave.
The star of the 1927 production is Bela Lugosi. But he doesn't just play the part. Lugosi comes to define vampire style for generations to come.
The way we think about vampires, with the cape, with the fangs, with the slick back hair, really come from Bela Lugosi.
Dracula really comes alive in 1931 when Lugosi reprises his role on the big screen. While it's not the first vampire film, it is the most influential. We're just 2 years into the Great Depression, and moviegoers need an escape from the real scary things all around them.
The stock market crashes in '29, and horror movies were a way of going to the theater and escaping the misery of your life for a couple of hours.
It was really the movies that picked up what Stoker did and ran with it and caught the imagination of a whole nother kind of person that may not have ever read the book.
What the viewers were looking for with Dracula, I think, was sex. To see this vampire come along and kind of ravage women was something really exciting for these people who everything else was not so fun right at that time.
By 1992, nearly 100 vampire movies have been made, and almost a century has passed since Bram Stoker's novel. It's time for acclaimed director Francis Ford Coppola to create a bold new cinematic take on the Dracula tale.
I had never, ever seen Dracula ever portrayed the way